The wind swept hard across the open prairie, carrying dust and dry tumbleweed through the desolate landscape. It was the kind of land that tested men's backs and women's faith, where every drop of water, every mouthful of food, came at the price of labor and grit. Ethan Cole, known to most as the lonely cowboy, rode back toward his ranch with a weary heart. For years, his only company had been his cattle, his horse, and the echo of memories he tried to bury. His wife had died 3 winters back, and their unborn child along with her. Since then, the big ranch house felt less like a home and more like a hollow shell of sorrow. He lived with silence, working the land because it was all he knew. Folks in town respected him, some pitied him, but few ever visited. Ethan wasn't one for company. He wasn't cruel, just broken in ways no one could quite mend. That's why the sight he stumbled upon that evening caught him off guard. Near the edge of his land, close to an old cedar tree, a woman sat slumped in the dirt, her clothes ragged and dusty. Beside her were 2 children, thin as reeds, their faces pale with hunger. The boy couldn't have been older than 6, the little girl perhaps 4. They clung to their mother's skirt, too weak to cry, too tired to play. Ethan pulled his horse to a halt, his sharp eyes narrowing. "Ma'am," he called out cautiously. The woman lifted her face, sunburned, weary, yet strikingly beautiful beneath the layers of exhaustion. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but only a whisper came. "Please, take my children." Ethan dismounted slowly, boots crunching against the dry soil. "What did you say?" Tears welled in her eyes, streaking through the dust on her cheeks. Her voice cracked with desperation as she repeated, "Take my children. They haven't eaten in 3 days." Ethan's chest tightened. He looked at the boy's hollow cheeks, the little girl's trembling hands. Hunger was carved into their faces, the kind of hunger no child should know. The cowboy's jaw clenched. "Ma'am, where's your husband? Your kin?" Her gaze fell to the ground. "Dead. All of them. My husband. Fever took him last winter. My parents passed years ago. We tried to make it on our own, but the drought—" Her voice broke. "I can't keep them alive anymore." The children pressed closer to her, sensing the heaviness in her words. Ethan knelt down, lowering himself to their level. "What are their names?" The boy, barely able to lift his chin, answered, "Daniel." He pointed to his sister. "And she's Ruth." Ethan's throat tightened. The names were soft, biblical, innocent. He looked back at the mother, who seemed on the verge of collapsing. "You think I just take them and leave you here to die?" he asked gently, though his voice carried steel. Her lips quivered. "If it means they'll live, then yes. I'd rather die alone than watch them starve by my side." For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Ethan studied her, this fragile woman with fire still hidden beneath her despair. He could see the strength it had taken to get this far, the miles she must have walked with her little ones clinging to her skirt. Something stirred in him then, something buried beneath years of grief and loneliness. A memory of what it felt like to dream of a family, to imagine laughter in his empty home. He stood abruptly, holding out his hand. "Come on. All of you. You're not staying out here another night." The woman blinked, startled. "But—" "No buts," Ethan cut her off. "You'll all come back with me. I got food, water, a roof. Ain't much, but it'll keep you alive." Daniel's eyes widened, while little Ruth clung tighter to her mother. The woman hesitated, torn between pride and desperation. I don't even know your name." "Ethan Cole," he said simply. "And I ain't the kind of man who leaves children to die on his land." For the first time, a flicker of hope lit in her tired eyes. She placed her trembling hand in his, and he helped her to her feet. The children clung to him as he guided them toward his horse. Ethan lifted Ruth first, settling her carefully in the saddle, then Daniel. The boy looked down at him with wary trust, as though silently asking if he meant what he promised. Ethan gave him a firm nod. "You're safe now, son." The woman, still weak, tried to walk alongside, but Ethan stopped her. "You'll ride too." "I'll lead." She opened her mouth to protest, but the cowboy's steady gaze silenced her. Exhaustion won out, and she let him help her mount behind her children. Leading the horse by the reins, Ethan started back toward his ranch. The sun dipped low, painting the prairie in hues of gold and crimson. Behind him, the mother held her children tightly, whispering promises of safety she hardly dared to believe. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir within him, something dangerously close to purpose. And as the shadows grew longer, he realized that maybe, just maybe, his lonely ranch wouldn't be so empty anymore. The sound of boots echoed faintly on the wooden porch as Ethan pushed open the door to his ranch house. The hinges creaked, and a faint smell of pine from the logs filled the air. It wasn't much, just a sturdy kitchen, a wide hearth, and a couple of rooms, but to those who had slept on the ground for days, it was a palace. Daniel's eyes widened as he stepped inside, clutching his sister's hand. Ruth blinked up at the rough-hewn beams overhead, as if unsure whether she was allowed to enter such a place. Their mother stood in the doorway, one hand braced against the frame, too weary to take another step until Ethan guided her gently in. "Sit," Ethan said, pointing toward the sturdy wooden table. "You all look about ready to drop." The woman hesitated, as though afraid she might soil the chair with her dusty clothes, but the children tugged at her skirt until she sank into it. Ethan turned toward the pantry, pulling out a sack of flour, a tin of beans, and the remains of smoked venison from the larder. He caught the way Daniel's eyes followed every move he made, how Ruth licked her lips unconsciously at the sight of food. Ethan's chest ached. He worked quickly, setting beans to boil and slicing meat, his large hands surprisingly careful as he prepared a meal. When the smell of hot food filled the air, Ruth whimpered softly, her small hands twisting in her dress. Ethan served them first, setting a plate before each child. "Go on," he said gently. Daniel glanced at his mother for permission. At her nod, the boy picked up his fork, but he didn't devour the food as Ethan expected. Instead, he carefully broke off pieces, making sure his little sister ate first. Ethan turned his gaze away for a moment, swallowing hard. He knew sacrifice when he saw it. The woman, too, tried to push her plate away, insisting the children eat instead. But Ethan set it firmly back before her. "If you starve yourself, you'll be no good to them. Eat." His voice was stern, but not unkind. For the first time that night, she obeyed. They ate in silence, broken only by the sound of spoons scraping plates. Ethan didn't touch his own food until their bellies were full. When Ruth finally leaned against her mother's arm, too drowsy to keep eating, he cleared the table quietly, giving them space. Later, by the fire, Ethan poured her a cup of water and handed it over. "What's your name?" he asked, his deep voice breaking the quiet. She hesitated before answering. "Clara." "Clara," he repeated, as though testing the name on his tongue. "You from around here?" Her gaze dropped to the flames. "Kansas. My husband and I tried to start fresh on a little plot. But the land turned dry, and the fever took him before winter was over. After that—" her voice trailed off, thick with sorrow. Ethan didn't press her. He simply nodded, staring into the fire. The children were asleep within the hour, curled up on a quilt in front of the hearth. Ethan fetched another blanket to drape over them, careful not to wake them. Then he looked back at Clara. Her face, softened in the glow of firelight, carried exhaustion but also a fragile beauty he hadn't noticed in the harsh sunlight. "You can stay here as long as you need," he said firmly. "The land's big, and the house has room enough. No one's gonna run you off." Clara's lips parted, her eyes searching his as though trying to understand what kind of man he was. "Why? You don't even know us." Ethan shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Because I once had a wife. She dreamed of filling this house with children. God saw fit to take her before that could happen. I couldn't save her. But maybe—" he glanced toward the sleeping boy and girl. "Maybe I can save someone now." Clara's breath caught, her hand pressing to her chest. She hadn't expected honesty, not from a man so quiet and rough around the edges. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the windows. Ethan was already outside, chopping wood, when Daniel padded out barefoot, watching him. Ethan paused mid-swing. "You ever chopped wood, boy?" Daniel shook his head. Ethan handed him the smaller axe, crouching down to show him. "Not with strength. With aim. Line it up, then strike clean." The boy tried, his little arm struggling, but he managed to split a log in half. His grin was wide, brighter than the morning sun. Ethan ruffled his hair. "Good man." From the porch, Clara watched, her heart tugging at the sight. For the first time in months, her son looked like a child again instead of a weary little protector. Days passed, then weeks. Clara helped around the ranch, cooking, mending clothes, tending the small garden behind the house. Ruth followed Ethan like a shadow, riding on his shoulders as he checked the fence lines, her giggles echoing across the fields. Slowly, the hollowness in their faces faded. Their cheeks filled out, their laughter returned. And in the evenings, when the children were asleep, Clara and Ethan found themselves sitting by the fire, speaking in low tones about everything and nothing. One night, as rain pattered against the roof, Clara turned to him. "You've given us more than I ever dreamed anyone would. I don't know how to repay you." Ethan met her gaze steadily. "You don't owe me anything, Clara. But if you're willing, maybe we can make something new here. Together." Her lips trembled, not from fear but from hope she hadn't dared to feel in a long time. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You're not," he said firmly. "I've lived with emptiness too long. You and those little ones, you make this place feel alive again." Clara's eyes shone with tears. Slowly, as though testing the waters of something fragile, she reached across the table and laid her hand atop his. Ethan's larger, calloused hand closed gently over hers, sealing a promise unspoken. In the weeks that followed, the bond only deepened. Daniel called him Mr. Ethan at first, then simply Pa, without even realizing when the shift had happened. Ruth carried flowers into the kitchen every morning, chirping that they were for Mama and Pa. Clara's heart swelled each time she heard it. And though Ethan said little, the softness in his eyes when he looked at her told her more than words ever could. By the time summer rolled into fall, the lonely cowboy was lonely no more. The house rang with laughter, the table was full at supper, and love, quiet, steadfast, and healing, had rooted itself deep in the heart of the ranch. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Ethan stood with Clara on the porch, watching Daniel chase Ruth through the tall grass. The golden light caught Clara's hair, and Ethan reached out, brushing a strand from her face. "You came here begging me to take your children," he said softly. "But what you gave me was a family." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks as she leaned into him, her voice breaking with gratitude. "And you gave us life again." Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, holding her close as the children's laughter carried on the breeze. For the first time in years, he felt whole. And for Clara, who had once been ready to give her children away, hope had bloomed where despair once lived. Together, they had turned hunger into plenty, loneliness into love, and strangers into a family.